Hello everyone, it's Becky here and welcome back to my channel and welcome to quite late January wrap-up. So I must say I had absolutely great reading month in January because in total I dealt with 7 books, which a great number for me, and 5 of them I finished, 1 I DNF'd and 1 I'm carrying to next month, probably next month, because I don't think I will be able to finish it just in 1 month because again it's German book or like book in German. But let me tell you, I explored all the different formats from ebooks to physical books to audiobooks, so I'm quite happy with this. And I think the one I will start with is the one I finished very recently, so sort of like the last book of January, which is called The Full Moon Coffeshop. And this is one of those books which I would recommend to someone who is looking for something very cozy and very sweet, and especially if you are a cat person, because Full Moon Coffeshop is a place which appears to people who need it, and it can appear in any sort of place and in any sort of form. And the food they serve you there is not the one you can choose from the menu, but the one they will bring to you according to what you need. And the best part of it, especially for cat people, is that this cafe is run by cats who can actually turn into humans as well, but mostly they are cats, which me as a dog person wasn't the highlight of the book, but I must say it was quite a lovely experience because I don't read as many books with cats. Yes. Anyway, my friends, what I really like about this book was, as I mentioned, it was quite lovely read and something I read in, I think it was 2 sittings. I had this as ebook, so I had a chance to explore my new e-reader. And I must say that for me, despite this, I think I would not give this more than 3 stars, probably like 2.5, because the little problem I had with this, and it's a similar type as I came across when I was reading The Healing Season of Pottery, which is also very, very lovely book, which I would recommend again to someone who wants to read something cozy and sweet and wrap up in the blanket with tea. But both these books has something very similar for me, and that was that they were too easy, or I don't really know how else to call it, but I just felt like everything that happened there was just solved so easily. It was like, okay, here is the obstacle, here is the problem, and here is how you can solve it, like this. And even the way to solving that problem was just very easy, you know. It was dealt with through like a couple of sentences, something in a way like, oh, you know what, you should do this and this, and the character was like, oh yeah, I really should do this, so I'm gonna do it. And that was the problem solved. And I just felt like it was quite on the surface when it comes to dialogues or like the relationships and the character developments, and I just would like if the book would go a little bit deeper in both actions and also the dialogues. So I did not enjoy this maybe so much, but the whole setting and atmosphere and magical realism and everything about this I quite enjoyed. But as I said, for me, probably not the best book I read, but quite nicely spent time. So my friends, that was the first book, and then the other one, I have actually my little list here because it was quite a lot of books. So another one which I'm going to be talking about was the book called Names, and I had this on audio, and I haven't really known this book because it's a debut novel by this author whose name I forgot, I'm so sorry. And I had this book on audio, and I came across this because I saw so many wonderful reviews this had. So I thought, okay, I might give it a go. And the premise also sounded very interesting to me. Basically, it's a story of one boy who is born, and his mother is deciding how to name him. And she is basically having 3 different names which she is choosing from. And the story develops in 3 different narration and tells a story of how the life of this boy would develop, or what would happen in his life when he would be called this and this and this. So it was quite interesting idea, but I must say that for me probably would be better if I had it as a physical book, because I must confess that whilst the narrator was absolutely brilliant, I did feel lost in approximately first half of the book, and I feel like it would be easier for me if I would have it physically, so I would be able to, you know, like flip through pages and just come back to something I maybe missed, because I don't think I wasn't really paying attention, but it's just not as easy to come back to something when you have audiobook, because you know. So I think that for me this would be a better experience as a physical book, but if you like audiobooks, maybe give it a go and you will see. This is not an easy read. It's full of trigger warnings, I would like to point out, such as domestic abuse, a lot of domestic abuse and violence, and even sexual assault. So not an easy one, but definitely as a debut novel it was really great, and I would give this like 3.5 stars, a little bit less because of my part of the confusion, but other than that I think someone can really enjoy this. One thing which I also had as a, I don't want to call it a problem necessarily with the book, but so obviously this boy was supposed to be a main character because the story surrounds around him and what happens when he has these 3 different names, but I felt like there were other characters, especially his mother and sister, who were given quite a lot of space in the book, which I did really enjoy. But for me personally, I was a little bit confused then about who is really the main character, and for me, I must say it was definitely the mother. Not necessarily the boy, but the mother herself. And there was something which I'm not a huge fan of if this happens in the books, that you kind of have a story which takes you somewhere a little bit else and you're a little bit confused about where to point your attention to, if that makes sense, but still very lovely and interesting read. And I am moving to another book which I read in one sitting and it was absolutely great, and it was called White Nights by Dostoyevsky. And this is my first read which I read by Dostoyevsky, because I think it was maybe half of a year ago or even longer when I tried to read Crime and Punishment. Did not end up well. I kind of could not really get through the first part where somebody was murdered in quite brutal way, and I was like, okay, let me put this aside for a while. I still do want to read much more of Dostoyevsky. I have Brothers Karamazov on my TBR for this year, but I'm still deciding whether to read it in Slovak or English, because none of it is original anyway, but I think I would like to read it in Slovak if I can get my hands on some translation from 60s or 70s, because those usually are my favorite books when I read in Slovak, especially, for example, books like from Alexandra Dima or Daphne du Maurier. These translations are the best when you are reading them in Slovak, in my opinion, but not so much of the current ones. So, but anyway, that was the sidetrack. Speaking of White Nights, it crushed me, but I loved it so much. This was just the, yeah, like I need romances like this. And also the story, or like the way it was written, it really reminded me writing actually of Alexandra Dima and Jane Austen as well, because when there was a character talking to another character who was falling in love with, and the way he spoke, like the rush, excitement, and like filled with love and joy, it really reminded me the dialogues Alexandra Dima wrote where he was writing between D'Artagnan and Constance, and then also a little bit of Jane Austen writing when it came to, for example, Mr. Knightley and Emma came to my mind, when he was very so much in love but kind of like holding back, but then he wasn't, and it was just so sincere and so lovely. So I really love this. But I also heard a couple of people talking that this one particularly, White Nights, is not necessarily very much like other books by Dostoyevsky, and his writing was quite different here. So again, I'm very interested to read some other of his books. And I actually forgot to tell you what the story is about. Well, basically it's a romance. I'm not gonna tell you much more. It's about 2 characters. It's very thin one. The characters meet, one falls in love, and you have to discover what happens next. But I just love it. I love love stories like this. Yes, definitely gonna read it one more time. I read this in one sitting. I think I already told you this, but I'm quite excited. And also the book contains one more short story, but for some reason I did not finish that one. I had a trouble to get into it, because maybe it was for the reason that I was determined to finish the whole book, but I was just so consumed by White Knight's story that I just couldn't really focus on the other one, and I haven't read that yet. So that's something I'm gonna read in future months, hopefully. Okay, my friends, then I would love to move to another book which I read on ebook, and I'm not gonna be talking about this too much because actually it's the first book which I read from my new reading project, which I'm gonna link here or somewhere else or into the description, and it's from my project Authors I Wanna Read. And if you remember, I spoke about this couple videos back. Was it my last video? Actually, it was my maybe last video, because I don't actually remember when I had time to film a video. So anyway, my friends, I'm now doing this reading project in this year and then probably in another upcoming years, where I have a list of authors which I haven't read yet, but they are quite well known, or they were on my list for a very long time, and Sally Rooney is one of them. And I decided to pick up Normal People as my first read by her, and I'm gonna do the whole video about this project itself, so I don't want to go very much deeply into this, but let me tell you, I was obsessed with this book and I just enjoyed reading it so much, because also for the reason that I feel like it's been a while since I read a book, not necessarily about romance, because obviously White Nights, but the book which focuses mainly on the relationship between two people. Because I do love reading about romance, but usually in the books I'm reading, it's somewhere sort of like a hidden, or it's like a little bit of side narration. But then this book was really about the relationship between two people, and I just enjoyed reading it so much, and I was just so invested, and I was so consumed by that. And I haven't seen the series, and I haven't I didn't really know much when I was going into this book, other than it's about the relationship between these two people. Really loved it. I don't like the ending though, I must tell you, and hopefully it's not a spoiler, because I feel like at this point I was probably the only one who either haven't read the book or haven't seen the series, so I'm gonna tell you, it's an open ending, and I have nothing against those types of endings in books, but I just didn't really like it in this one. I didn't. And also I feel like, especially on the Marianne sides of the story, like there could be a little bit more explained how some stuff evolved, especially with her family, for example. But oh well. But I really like it, and it's especially something which I know I would like to read more, like more books by Sally Rooney. So if you have a recommendation for other of her books which I should pick up as next, please let me know in the comments. And I want to say if I have something else in my notes, because I wrote this actually into my phone. No, that's all I wanted to say to this book, so okay, we can move to another one. And my friends, this one which I'm going to mention is the first book I finished in January, but already as I was listening to it, because it was again audiobook, I knew it's gonna be my top 3 of 2026. The first book I read in January, but I have so much confidence it's going to be one of my best and most favorite books I read this year and also in general, and this book is called My Friends by Fredrik Backman. I read 2 books by this author previously. One was Anxious People, which I absolutely loved, and one was Men Called Owe, which I did not really finish because it wasn't my favorite. But My Friends, that was... let me tell you, I cried 3 times publicly out of nowhere when I was commuting to work and I was listening to this. It's so beautifully written, so many quotes which I wrote down. I couldn't underline them, but it's another thing. I definitely do want to get the physical book as well, because I just want to have it in my library and I miss it there, and definitely something I'm gonna be rereading throughout my life, because it was so beautiful. Also not an easy read. Please be aware of quite a lot of trigger warnings, such as domestic abuse, again, addiction, a lot of violence, and even death. So not an easy one, but so wonderful. So let me tell you the story very briefly. It's a story of a young girl who is very much interested in arts, but her life is not easy, and somehow she manages to get her hands on this very famous painting coming from very famous author. And what is wonderful about this is that throughout the story, it's basically sort of like 2 stories in one. So the first of all, we have this young girl and her life unfolding, but also the story of the painting and how the painting came to life. And this speaks about the painter who done the painting, and also his friends and his life when he was a child. So these 2 stories are basically separated through like few decades. However, eventually they connect, and we see how the painting and then the friends group and the people who had something to do with the painting affect the life of a young girl. I don't know how else to explain this, because I don't want to spoil anything for you, because it's so wonderful. But if there is one book I would recommend to read to anyone, it's this one. And let me tell you, my sister is just listening to this on audio as well, and she's sending me the voicemails all the time, so I guess she really loves it. But she's like, oh, tell me what's gonna happen, because I cannot bear this anymore, I have to know. So highly recommend, and I think it's really something that can be read by anyone, no matter what kind of genre you like or how old you are. It's just so wonderful, and trust me, you will reread it as well. Yeah, so lovely. Yes, I just absolutely loved it. Anyway, my friends, so that was my favorite book, and then I have 2 more books which I would like to mention to you, and the one is the DNF actually, and it's called The Woman in Love, which is a book I started to read back in December, and I was transferring it to January, and that just stayed there, and it's gonna stay there for a while, because it's a story of woman in love and romance. Funnily enough, as I said, I haven't read many of them, but there you go, I read quite a lot of books in January regarding romance. But what I liked about this book at the beginning was that it was quite philosophical. I did not really expect it to be quite philosophical, but it opened quite a lot of topics, especially the role of a woman in society and their relationship towards men, and then experiencing or like exploring the pleasure for both men and women, and be quite open in that. And I find it very interesting, and quite a lot of stuff which I underlined that also made me to do some research, which was very interesting because I did not expect this from a fiction book. However, the issue I had with this was that I was quite confused about the setting and the time and the period this book was set, because originally when I started to read this, for some reason I imagined everything regarding the fashion and the whole world to be somewhere from like Little Women setting, and even the costumes and everything. And then as I was reading it, suddenly I realized it's quite a lot of decades later, so that kind of confused my brain so much, and I had a little bit of troubles reading it, because then something I imagined was completely different and was different periods, so I was like, what is going on? But then it kind of started to make sense, because I realized that this book is a sequel, which I realized in the middle of the book, and maybe that's why I didn't really care as much about the characters in the first place, which is never good. And that's also one of the reasons why I didn't enjoy it so much, because I just did not really care, and eventually every single dialogue they had is just turned into quite a lot of deep philosophical stuff, which I like, and as I said, I really appreciated at the beginning, but now I felt like even when talking about little stream in the forest or something, it was just turning into like very deep, heavy topic to discuss between people, and I just did not really find the points they were saying to be very on point or useful or whatever. So I set the book aside for a while, and I think I would like to come back to it, because as I said, it's an interesting book, but I think that it's something I will do after I finish the first book, which I was told, or not told, but then I discovered that apparently it shouldn't be a problem that I haven't read the first part before picking up this one. But obviously for me it was a problem, so anyway, my friends. And I just realized I'm looking at that book in my library, I forgot to bring it here anyway, so you're gonna see the picture. And that's actually with the same book, which I forgot, which is lying there, and I don't have it here when I'm filming, but I'm too lazy to get up right now. But that's the last book I'm going to mention, so again, here is all the pictures of the books I read, because I forgot to bring the physical copies. But the last book I'm going to mention is The Horror Date by Sebastian Fitzek, and it's a book which I mentioned in my birthday book haul video, I believe, because that's when I got the book. And this is a story which is obviously written in German, and it's something which I'm trying to get through and translate and read it, and I cannot really comment on this when it comes to the writing or the story itself, because so far I'm 50 pages in, and I'm also carrying this book with me to February and also probably to upcoming months, because as you know, I'm just learning German, so it's a tough one. But I must tell you, when that made me very happy, because if you remember, in summer I started to read this one German book which was for children. It was some sort of like a fantasy book, and I know I promised you a vlog video about this, and I'm so sorry, but it's not gonna be anytime soon, because I started to edit this video actually 3 or 4 times, and every time I did it I just almost died from shame. So it was just so awkward, me trying to read in German and then telling you what's the book about, and just not really even remembering it, because I was reading it literally like 1 month break and then coming back to it, not even it was a mess. So maybe one day, not now. However, I am determined to finish this book, and I wanted to say, this is what I wanted to say, that I'm so pleased and so happy, because when I was reading that first book, which is still not finished at this point, by the way, but I was really not able to read anything, despite that being a book for children, but I had to translate every single word I was reading, and I just did not get it really, and even like the whole context of the whole page, I was like, I translated almost everything and I still just don't know what it says. But now reading this book, it's also a different genre, it's more contemporary, it's also, I forgot to tell you, but it's about this dating app which is actually for people who are terminally ill. So it's sort of like a dark humor. I don't really know what to expect, but my boyfriend sort of like picked it up for me, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna give this a go. But what I wanted to say to you is that as I was reading it now, so often it happens to me actually that I am able to read the full page and I get the context, and you cannot imagine how happy that makes me, because obviously I still use the translator and the dictionary. I'm trying to translate everything because I have to, but I can grasp the concept of what's written on the paper, and I can get the whole page even without translating every word before. So I'm very happy. So my friends, I think that's it. Did I forget anything? No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 books in January. I'm very happy with this. Please, if you finished up to this point, let me know what was your favorite read of the January. And I wanted to say something else, but I just got completely blank page in my head. Anyway, my friends, I hope you've been doing well and you had a lovely start of the year, and then also your reading month in January was a successful one. Please let me know your favorite book from that month, and I will see you with another video very soon. Take care, bye bye!